Hello, everybody.
What?
Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Palme d'Or winner in random order. And we're back after our little hiatus. We've settled our lives a bit, and we're here to talk about 2 cents worth of hope. As we said at the end of about a month ago, last episode, this is an Italian film directed by Renato Castellani, starring Maria Fiore, Vincenzo Mussolino, and Filomeno Russo, among others. That's what IMDb says. I love these Italian names because I actually feel like I can pronounce them, unlike Swedish and Polish and all these, these
other gobbledygook languages.
It's all Greek to me. Anyhow, we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I must remind you of what film, so long ago we talked about. It was The Child. And we gave that L'Enfant, a French film.
Oh.
It got a 7.7 out of 10, putting it at the number 14th spot on our list.
Whoa.
Out of? Just to remind people?
Yes, because it's been a little bit out of 30.
Me?
So we will then
Okay.
add a 31st film to our list this evening.
Which one?
Well,
2 cents worth of hope?
it needs
I
no
think.
introduction because I already said the title.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to
Needs
pass
no
it.
further introduction. Yes.
Then, boy, howdy, you might as well not talk about it anymore. God.
Oh, no. That would defeat the purpose of this here show. But first, we got to do the one last bit of housekeeping. Read a comment. Abram might or might not have one. We've been
We're a little rusty.
stockpiling.
We're a little out of practice.
No, I have it. Don't worry.
I do have to
a
say,
comment.
to vamp a little bit, Timo called it a short hiatus. I'd say it's fairly long. Probably the longest we've ever had. The longest that the world has ever gone without Quest. Except for the time that we didn't... Yeah, sans the time before we started Quest.
Origin of the universe.
Up until
circa
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
We're also now back in individual locations. Never the twain shall meet again.
True.
Unfortunately, yeah.
The
Not a lot of Twain going on here.
Twain. What's the like 4 version of Twain? Because there's 4 of us.
Right?
Twain.
quat.
Never the court shall meet.
Never the
No,
court shall
Aaron,
meet.
how hard is it to open the YouTube Studio app?
Well, it would load, and now I can't find the comments, but I found
Oh,
one.
dear.
I have a
Okay,
comment.
okay.
I have a comment. This comment comes from friend of the show, friend of the Discord. I would say leader of the Discord, Raina Harper, who says,
sure.
on a review of The Child,
Ringleader. All these fucking monkeys.
A benevolent leader.
Trained animals.
benevolent leader of the Discord, Raina, says on the review of The Child, thanks for talking about Bruno, guys. I'm excited to check out this film now, hearing all about its many intricacies. Love movies of this variety, of which this seems to have been alongside the road to the Safdie's work, and also Sean Baker. Excited for Anora analysis. Right. This was supposed to be about Anora. Are we going to address that? We're not doing Anora.
We'll
Right
get
now.
to it.
We'll do
far as I know.
Anora when it inevitably gets nominated for Best Picture and maybe wins, question mark. So you'll have 2 Anora discussions coming down the pike. Just don't you worry about it.
Don't
At least one,
worry
maybe
about
2.
it.
I'll say that.
Exactly.
But no, it's gonna have to wait till the new year, till the nominations come out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Real.
but now we've got an equally biting and culturally conscious movie here. 2 cents worth of hope. Everyone's been raving about it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's get
What's the
into
movie
it.
about?
Tanner, what happens plot-wise
Well-
in 2 Cents of Hope?
So
Great question, Timo.
in the film 2 Cents of Hope, it begins with
Worth of.
Antonio. Antonio returns from presumably World War II, and he is greeted by his mother and many other people in his small village outside of Naples, Italy, or Napoli.
Napoli.
And
For short.
he needs a job, as many people do when they return from war. But hey, it's post-war Italy. There's not a lot of jobs to go around. Economy's not super strong. So he's
I can
struggling.
relate. I
He's
just returned from
hustling.
Nebraska and I need a job.
Well, that's a fair point. Economy's not super strong, and hey, I'm sure I'm not gonna go there anyway. He gets home and he meets a young woman whose name is Carmela, and Carmela likes him or doesn't like him, and he likes her or doesn't like her, and they have sort of a fraught relationship. It's a will they won't they situation, while Antonio also is trying to find some small work, or maybe has to travel into Naples to find work, and falls into line with some communist organizers to maybe find a greater purpose. and then Carmela's father doesn't approve of him because he doesn't have a job. It's really a genre title that popped into my mind for this kind of film is a povcom. It's a poverty comedy.
The pop
And
I think my genre title
Like
would be
trading places.
cart before the horse kind of thing.
as we will discuss, there's a lot of things that happen in this movie, but it's largely revolved around, can Antonio get a job, and will he and Carmela like get together?
Yes. Get married specifically, because
Yes.
this takes place in 1900s Italy. We don't know exactly when the year
I
this is
think
supposed
it's
to have
post-
been.
World War II,
War.
right?
The film
Yeah.
is from 1952.
Yeah, I have
Yes.
to imagine it's contemporary of some kind,
Sure.
some way.
But my point being, the question mark of if they're going to get married or not
Yes.
is heavily impacted by the culture of the time, which is based around having dowries and having a job and having everything fit just so the entire community accepts your marriage as acceptable, as fitting into their social norms. And so this movie largely relies around, let's try to fit into social norms, and then you're also talking about, I might say a pair of people, but really just one person who doesn't fit into social norms. Because this is a lopsided film, I would say.
I would contend that as well.
In many ways, I'll just say it.
Go for it.
I think this movie is really weird.
Yeah.
I can't say I liked it, because even though I think it has a interesting and unique sense of place, no character in this movie acts in a believable way, an understandable way, and it just makes me not like almost any of them. And so it makes it a very uncomfortable film to watch, where I'm just dropped into miscellaneous scenes that have little to no connective tissue, and I'm just forced into these sequences where no one is acting in a way that makes me feel like they're human beings. And so I'm just like, it just feels like a lost cause to me.
It is a film filled to the brim with characters who act in rash ways and make staggeringly stupid decisions a lot of the time, and who just, I don't know, just dance around each other and are overly abrasive to one another. And I wish I could say that, like, hey, that feels purposeful, and I think it points to like this sort of social commentary of the time or anything like that. But I can't say that it does, because in theory, this film is like Italian neorealism, but it does not follow the characterization conventions of any of those other films. Some of the most celebrated films of all time, some films that we have talked about and will talk about in this series. It doesn't like follow those conventions at all, so it feels like it falls into that genre just because that is how movies were made at the time, as opposed to some sort of greater artistic statement based on what the characters are doing or saying, or what their arcs are. Because it's very odd to me that this film shared the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and really feels like the forgotten other side of the coin to Othello, which is a much more celebrated and revered film. Certainly one that is easier to find than 2 Cents Worth of Hope. So, I know it feels like a weird. I think Tucker calling it a weird movie is very apt. I feel the same way.
Abram, what did you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel largely indifferent towards the film. I don't think it's particularly compelling, but it also moves at such an unbelievable speed that it's simultaneously, in my view, hard to become bored, because I feel like the life of Antonio is so colorful and so mired by constant inconvenience and tragedy that you really never have time to stop and sit with the doldrums intrinsic to almost everything that happens in the film, because you're on to the next idea within 3 scenes. How about?
Yeah.
And so the result for me is like kind of like flipping through a book really fast. I think that there's maybe a more meaningful, for me as a viewer, more meaningful version of this film that is maybe a little bit less concerned with plot and more concerned with story and character arcs and character relationships. But I think the version we have now is a sort of amusing, if a sort of immediately forgettable watch.
I would definitely agree on the amusing front. The word I was going to use, I'd say this movie humored me. It's funny. I think that the way that these characters interact with each other is very it's very Italian. It's very like unlike how we Americans are used to like seeing just people and communities interact with each other. So that aspect of the film is constantly interesting just to see how like how the mother treats the son and how the son treats the fiance's father and like that all of those interactions for me were pretty interesting and humorous to see play out. But I agree that it's a little light on the meaning. But I also think that the intention of the film, especially given what Tanner said about its PovCom genre identity, is that it's there to just kind of lighten the spirits. Obviously, things are in a pretty rough state nationally, economically in Italy at the time. And so the film makes light of this situation that is so hard and tough. And I think some of the social commentary about the father not of the fireworks father not really wanting to allow his daughter to be married off and lose the dowry to a lower class to like sell his daughter off to a lower class man is an interesting commentary, even though it ultimately doesn't go all that far.
Yeah.
By and large, I think that the film has some amusing elements, but not a lot of wide appeal for like a modern audience.
Mhm.
So here's the interesting thing about the structure of this movie, because Abram makes a very compelling point about how it's hard to get bored watching this movie because it's moving at such a clip and scenes are progressing so quickly and we're moving to different areas and the entire situation of are you safe in a job? Are you making money? Who likes you? Who doesn't like you? Is always changing. But I honestly feel like the reason why this movie still ended up feeling like it dragged to me, even though it was a 90-minute movie that had very, very quick scenes and very fast dialogue, as I want to talk about, is because ultimately the status quo doesn't really change. I mean, if you start at the beginning of the movie and you're like, well, the son and his mother have a fraught relationship because she puts a lot of pressure on him and he needs to get a job and he feels a responsibility towards her, but obviously she doesn't treat him very well, so that causes a little bit of tension. That is true from the first scene of the movie to the last scene of the movie.
Mhm.
Okay, so Antonio and Carmela, they have this sort of they want their relationship where they kind of banter with each other and they're very childish, actually quite a lot like The Child, which we reviewed last. And that's true from the first time they meet to the last time they meet, until they leave. It's true with the dynamic between Antonio and Carmela's father. It's true between her father and her. Like all of these relationships, you'd think would have some sort of arc, conclusion, progression, but as you really think through the sequences, it is the scenario that changes and not the characters. And I think that is why I found this movie kind of impenetrable, because I like a lot of movies that are fast and have a lot of characters and a lot of ideas, even if they're not all wrapped up in the end. And because none of these characters seem, to my memory, evolve almost at all, their dynamics change almost at all across the course of the film, and because everyone except for Antonio is largely unlikable. Like they're kind of just rude to each other for the entire movie.
Mhm.
Antonio is kind of like the one saving grace of he's really just a normal guy. It to me is like the evil twin brother of like You Can't Take It With You, which is a movie we reviewed on Quest years ago, which is about this low income family and being married off to someone who's more wealthy.
Great
and
reference.
they're all kind of like trapped together and someone's trying to get a job and there's fireworks.
I think I was thinking. Okay, thanks for bringing this up.
But
Continue.
to
Sorry, I'll finish
close that up real quick, the reason why I love You Can't Take It With You and I don't like 2 Cents Worth of Hope is because in You Can't Take It With You, the characters learn to like each other. They learn to appreciate each other's strengths and weaknesses, and the bond is formed over the course of the film. But that bond is not achieved here, and the only bond that is achieved is the marital romantic relationship that was, I think, already implicit from the very beginning, and so I never really felt like there was too much stakes, even though it technically goes up and down. It feels like a flat movie, even though it's a very rough movie because everyone's always fighting, but it ultimately ended up feeling very flat to me.
Tucker, I want to thank you for bringing up You Can't Take It With You, because when like the wacky patriarch character is introduced and they make fireworks in their home, like that's like a business, that's like the family business is making fireworks. It's like, this came out well after You Can't Take It With You, so the influence seems clear to me in that regard. And it's largely concerned. The film is largely about like will these two characters get together, et cetera, et cetera. And to your point, I think it's just a matter of cultural difference that like you can't take it with you as an American film, and so thusly we must sort of underline and bring together the family unit at the end of the film, like that is the resolution. Whereas with this, the point of the film seems to be that the social constructions of the time are far too stringent for the younger generation and must be sort of revoked wholeheartedly and thoroughly by those young people as they try to like I don't know as they try to move forward with their lives. They must break out of those social structures that have been laid forth by the church or their parents or the townspeople or whatever. So yeah, it's really a cultural difference in that regard. But again, while I understand that is the point, I don't think the film does a good job of like making that point salient for me.
So the part of the movie where I think that like conclusion about society and the acceptance it's made when they eventually do get like married and the town like blesses them in that market scene where that is like the kind of conclusion of them seeking societal acceptance and gaining it when everybody, at least all the people that are around, see Antonio calling out the father for how preposterous he's being, for the lengths that he's making him go and the unreasonableness of his like position. Like, I'll never hire you even though I demand you get a job, and it's your daughter forced me out of the job that I had. And like, well, the town sees that for how it is and comes together and join him. They all know that it's
a lot of conflicts.
there's bad economic times. And so he's like, well, I'll pay you. And they all just kind of see the marriage of the young people for love, I think is what the film is positioning it as. And for not a lot more, the two romantic characters do go through a lot to prove their love to each other. And they have some conflicts about not really believing in that relationship between each other. And by the end, they work it out. And that's kind of the scene where I think this is made clear. Not a lot, I think, is said
There's still
in other
divide.
parts of the film about this, but that kind of underlying tension of, especially with the father and this kind of class notion that the Antonio's impoverished family can't really ever rise to the level of acceptance of the fireworks makers, who in reality aren't going to be all that wealthier than the other people, but they still hold a grudge against those in the lower class. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me about the film is that there are these sort of suggestions edgewise, particularly in Antonio's life and pursuit of a job, that suggest a cultural context and sort of a thread to pull on that is more compelling than the central romance. Because I agree with you, Timo. I think it ultimately boils down at the end to love triumphing over all, which is effective as just a kind of a fun plot level beat. But the stuff that I really gravitated towards was, for instance, an exchange early in the film when there's this owner of a soda shop offering like 300 lira to come bottle soda for a day. And the unemployed guys hanging around the fence said, well, that's only a 50 lira increase over our daily unemployment as is, and we don't want to jeopardize that. I think moments like that are really interesting. I think moments wherein Antonio's military service and his life after service are raised, to me that paints a much more interesting picture about his character and the town they're in, and then obviously its proximity and different culture on money and economy and jobs to Naples. I like all that stuff a lot. It's ultimately, though, just told through suggestion, so there's not a whole lot to grab onto there.
I think an important note is that this is all like a Southern Italian setting, and you can look at current Southern Italian like wealth and poverty statistics, and it's still a poor region of the world, even or for Europe. It was back then, and it hasn't recovered.
Yeah. I agree with you that these are interesting ideas, and I remember a number of moments where thematic stuff that we would dig into in Quest came up, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. How is this going to build? The moment in which one of the opening scenes of the film where Antonio's mother is making dinner for her family. She's so happy that her son is back, and apparently she stole a rabbit from someone, and then the police show up, and she tries to lie about it, and then Antonio pays the fine, just kind of like bribes the police to go away, and then mentions to her mom that this is actually less than it would have been if you just bought the rabbit like flat out. And that is an interesting moment of the culture of the time, the economics of the time, the ways that the police are interacting with the lower class people. That's an interesting moment. But the movie is largely unconcerned with these moments outside of how do they make our characters kind of mad at each other. Because there are all these moments of, I want to give you a job. I don't want a job. I'm working. You're not working enough for me. People like lying to each other about all these different things that at like a high level, you look at it and you're like, that is a thematic point about economics and about class consciousness and things like that. But then when you look at how that like affects the scenes in the movie, they're usually just waved by and we move on to something else. And the characters seem to largely forget about these things because they're on to something else that they're worrying about. And I guess you might say that is intentional in the sort of struggle that especially Antonio is going through, but also Carmela, of every day is a struggle and every day is a new challenge, especially in the situation that they're in. But on a plot level, it makes the film feel very muddied. And like it's hard to pin down what it's trying to say about any of these things because it seems unconcerned with its own serious points about the culture of the time.
Yeah. I think you're right, Tucker. I think it's because it's much more concerned with being this sort of episodic, zany comedy about these crazy townsfolk.
Yeah.
Which I could get on board with. I think what we're kind of getting at is that it's maybe trying to split its time and not doing it very effectively. And ultimately, what it comes down to for me, the comedy side doesn't work either, is because I don't feel like I know the characters, even though we're trying to dedicate some time to make that the case. It's hard to pin down why it didn't really work for me. Like, there's a couple scenes that I found funny, amusing, whatever words that we've thrown out already, but largely because it is so disconnected. The comedy didn't build for me, the thematic material didn't build for me, the relationships didn't build for me, and it's because the film is so segmented and so chopped up, and it feels like there's not really a sense of ratcheting tension in any of the storylines that it throws out, because those things that we're talking about with like the marital dowries and stuff like that, that is a plot point in something that is meant to be or set up to be important with Antonio's sister, Juliana, who sleeps with a wealthy man named Don Luigi, and then Antonio and Antonio's mother basically try to like hustle Don Luigi's family into marrying Juliana so she can be wealthy and like taken care of. But then they flip that back around and Antonio has to make the money so Juliana can have a dowry to get married. And because there's like 3 or 4 things that are of a higher order of importance in the movie above that, it feels so backgrounded that you're like, Antonio comes back at the end of the movie. He's like, "Oh, I got enough money for Juliana to get married." I was like, "Oh yeah, that is something that was happening earlier in the film, what isn't it?"
And there's the whole plot with Antonio and the theater chain owner, wherein he is like a Mad Max blood bag for her son.
He's a blood bag for this boy, and also sleeping with that woman, even though we never see their relationship.
Very heavily implied, but
time skip that. It's also there's a number of weird implicating lines in this film that I want to talk about at some point. Since we're on the topic of this woman, there's a point where she says that whenever she tried to like get hot and heavy with Antonio while he was running her film canisters / blood transfusions around, she would hear her child's voice say, "Mom, that man has his blood in me. or like my blood and
That's
him.
my blood.
It's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
blood. And then she couldn't sleep with him. Just want to put that on the record. That is the thing a character
characters
says
just
in the
constantly
movie.
say weird shit, and I mean, nowhere is that more apparent than all the female characters.
Yeah,
I mean,
well-
all the female characters of this movie. Antonio's mother, Carlina,
Carmela.
what's the woman? Carmela, yeah, Carmela. Don Luigi's mother, who's
Yes.
like incredibly old,
Yes.
and this theater chain owner. They're just like the weirdest people you've ever encountered in your life, and they just yodel shit in the middle of the street, and they run away, and they have like they're missing skills, and they like don't seem to do anything with like, and they have like strange goals that are just like halfway manipulating people, but you don't even like. The script doesn't provide any like logic behind what they're doing, so you don't even feel like, are they doing this maliciously or not? Like, they're just perplexing characters, and it makes the film feel like I'm just like running up against it. Like, who are you people? This is
Like
bizarre.
it feels like you're a horse that's running up a hill, and Antonio's gonna have to like come alongside you and try and pull you up that hill with him.
Or like I'm Carmela going through the little weird hill tunnel, and there's like 5 farmer women like just yelling, singing, berating me for my choices that are not mine.
To connect your point, Teal, and Tucker's point, correct me if I'm wrong here, but is like the main conflict of the Antonio Carmela story that, and the running gag, if you want to call it that, it's supposed to be a gag that Antonio keeps getting fired. The main issue there, the point of conflict, is that Carmela is so stupid that she somehow Mr. or Mrs. Magoo's I guess Mrs. Magoo's her way into getting Antonio fired every single time.
Basically,
I think so. I mean, that's kind of what he yells at Carmela's father about at the end of the film. I mean, when he gets fired or let go or whatever, or found out about his communist activities because Carmela goes and yaps back in town. She doesn't keep her mouth shut. What are the other examples?
and then he goes and slaps her.
Yeah. Well,
But also her being like at the theater, and then
oh yeah, she's there, and then the theater.
it's
Yeah.
like slut, and then they.
The only job
the
that she
scene
has
kinda
that
ends.
she doesn't get him fired from is the bus thing, and that's just because there's all the old Italian men who want to be the ticket taker and they can't get the bus going on time.
Yeah. So I don't. Things like that
What
are
about
like
the horse thing? That was one of his jobs.
It makes
Well,
it
that
very.
went out of business because the bus came to town.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, because the horses all needed to be turned into glue.
I think that at the core of the oddity that is this film is just a real stylistic inconsistency. There is a narrator employed sparingly and somewhat randomly.
There's like
throughout
11
the
lines
film.
by the narrator in the whole movie, and
And now one of them is really funny because I think the only thing that really made me laugh in the movie is when Antonio gets the courage to go find a better life for himself in Naples, and then is immediately arrested and immediately sent home. And the
Yes.
narration's like, his immigration didn't last very long.
Right.
And I like that, but that also draws into question, just if you're thinking about the coherence of the film as a whole, why is the narrator here? What it suggests to me, and is, I think, evidently clear, there's just too much plot here. And they realized in sort of these head-scratching moments, I would say, while writing the film, oh, damn, we really just got to get to the next plot point. So we just need this voice over here to stitch these scenes together. And I think because of that, it becomes very hard to understand these character dynamics you're bringing up, Tanner, because I understand at like a plot level, like the Spark Notes level reason for how Carmela has ruined Antonio's life. But you can't get any layers deeper, I don't think, because even the movie is making concessions like stylistically at a macro level to just try to get through its material. And I don't feel like all that material is equally strong. The more like physical comedy is quite good. I like him running the horses and scaring the horses to get up the hill. I like all the people in the bus. There's so many people in that bus.
Or the guy like laying down in front of the tires. He's like, this bus isn't going anywhere. I'm going to be the ticket taker. I'm going to get run over by this bus if you want it to move.
That's great stuff. But then when you have to find some sort of like overarching structure for your variety show, it becomes a lot harder, I think, to justify all these disparate elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to focus on the comedy for a little bit because that is really that and the tone and the sense of place, I think, are the things that do end up working for me with this film. They're not enough to make me care a particularly large amount,
Fair.
but there were these moments where we would like cut to a wide and there's just a crowd of people just like running and yelling at each other, and we're in these really interestingly architectured like Italian streets that are very clearly a real place, and we're busting down people's doors and we're yelling at them, and people are singing and there's kids climbing over walls, and again, it's the architecture, it's the cacophony of all these people and just everything that's going on. I'm like, this is a unique tone for a film. Like, it's a unique style. Like, it does create a sense of like tension-filled place that I think, if it was handled more deftly on a character level, could be very compelling. I think back to one of my favorite movies, like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, or What's Up, Doc, or these comedies that are very much about all these people misunderstanding each other and running in and out of doors, and it's the cinematic equivalent of like the crowd of guys around the boss that follow him around in the hallways.
Sure.
But I like that, and I kept feeling like
For
this,
me,
if he's committed to it,
may add something real
Yeah.
quick. It's about the community. What you talked about is
Yeah,
like
sure.
the community shows so vibrantly in this film.
Mhm.
I was like, I think what and that's kind of the point that we end on in the film. The ending note is that like the community is the thing that matters most in accepting of this couple. The money doesn't matter, but the community is there to support these two people, even though families may not, or families are causing more problems. I think that there is something to be said about that. This film is making a very strong argument for the value of a tight knit and like integrated community that basically has each other's backs, even though they yell at each other the entire 90-minute
Yeah.
runtime.
Yeah. It's
Well,
it's certainly
I do want to quickly mention though that the reason why that point, ultimately, I think you're right, that is the point the movie lands on. We tried to talk about what do we think the point of this movie is, and I agree that that's probably it because that's where it ends. But I don't feel like that's particularly well established in this film, because it just kind of seems to kind of flip on a dime by the end, like literally the last scene of the movie where everyone's like, "Oh, but it's okay, take this on
Well-
credit." No, like here's a scarf, and I'm like, where were you people before? Like, no one was supporting anyone
Yeah.
up to this point. Everyone hated everyone, as far as I know, for 80 minutes of this movie. And then for the last 3 minutes, it's like, well, we found a common enemy, and so now we all love each other. And like, you can
Yeah.
just have my stuff.
it's because it's just as simple as like these characters aren't well written, because you have this community that is full of colorful characters who are zany and act strange and are yelling at each other and talking over each other and bursting into each other's homes. And then in the center of it, we are following Antonio, who, if you break it down, is a relatively level-headed, rational
Focused.
guy.
Stand up, do-gooder type for the most part.
Exactly. Very handsome as well. I do have to give it to Mr. Mussolino. He is a very, very handsome
Any
gentleman.
relation?
No.
You really get nervous for like 98% of his name, don't you? You're like, oh yeah, Mr. Mussolino.
Ah.
Though I suppose it would be convenient for him to change it by 1950s Italy, but I digress. He is like because he is supposed to be the trope of like the comedic straight man is obviously well versed and has been very successful in numerous other comedic stories and films and television series stories, whatever throughout time or however you want to quantify that. But it just comes down to like, he is also the one that is in the right all of the time, basically.
Yeah.
Like at the very end, he is like, "Well, I've had enough, and I'm gonna be the one who sets everything straight now." And that's just to me just not compelling character writing. That everyone is suddenly like, "Oh, this level-headed guy is actually the smart guy at the end of the story. How couldn't we have seen that?" Like that's usually not how the comedic straight man thing plays out. It's that he learns from the people and sort of breaks down some walls or changes his frame of mind somehow. But that's not how this story is laid out at all.
He's
Well,
kind of
it's-
over infallible. He can do no wrong, basically.
Well, he
He's
just
also-
never does wrong. Yeah.
He's also like the beneficiary of like the most lenient gig economy that's ever existed. But like if you think about the concept of the film, and one of the core struggles being class and wealth, and if the whole film is indeed about trying to afford the dowry of this woman, you would assume on a basic writing level that there would be more struggle intrinsic to finding the job, and more stakes to keeping the job. But in fact, even when Antonio finds himself in trouble and fired, he is into the next job by the time that the next scene is beginning, with rare exception.
Mhm.
And so I think that also removes a degree of dramatic tension that I think would be intrinsic to the film otherwise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
think about Carmela's character as the kind of this, obviously the foil to Antonio's do-gooder, always in the right. Carmela is positioned as a pretty much always in the wrong kind of character, and pretty much all her attempts
To everyone
to
around her,
get
yeah.
the love and affection of Antonio is seen as bad. All the other women seem to hate her for what she's trying to do. She isn't given that same treatment. And so it is kind of like that will they, won't they is a little hard to buy into when
Yeah.
you're even though I personally don't see the actions that she's doing as wrong. Everybody else in the movie is reacting to them very negatively. And so it's like, why would Antonio go with this woman other than that she is like pretty rabid for him? Like, I think it's a little, I don't know, far-fetched. It's like medium fetched is what I'd say.
Sure.
Well, the problem with the love dynamic of this movie, which really is the A plot of the film,
Yeah.
is I don't know why they like each other.
Tucker, I agree. I wanted to get to this next one. Continue.
They just stumble into each other, and I think one of the people that we never really get a chance to know mentions to one or the other that the other one kind of thinks that they're attractive or whatever, and then we're kind of just snowballed into they kind of fight a little bit and like don't really like they
bicker a lot.
Fight. Like,
there's a lot of bickering.
Yeah.
It's mostly bickering between them.
And then I never feel like we actually established that I know that they like each other enough to make that their like sole commitment, like the main thing that's like driving them. But on an emotional level, I'm never sold on that actually being the case because, and this is to Abram's point about the movie just kind of like shoveling itself through its plot points. The main conflict of this movie, to me, isn't that Carmela gets him fired a couple of times. I think that's the main bit of the movie. But the main story crux of this film is that Antonio just constantly just leaves whenever he doesn't have a job. He doesn't tell anyone where he's going. He doesn't mention it. He doesn't have this idea. We don't know where he's going. And the scene just cuts. And it is X weeks later, he's got a new job. No one knows why or when or how he has this new job. And to Carmela's credit, if you are trying to be romantically involved with someone and they just leave your town and find a new job somewhere else, like 6 times, that would be infuriating. And so like the cycle of this movie is that like, oh man, I got fired because my girlfriend's kind of dumb. Oh well, might as well try to find another job. But I'm not going to tell her because I'm an upstanding young Italian man and I don't need help from anyone. So I'm going to go out and do it on my own. And it's like, well, honestly, he's the problem.
Yeah, but you're
Well, yes, I
forgetting.
mean, we sort of laid out that like, you know, he can do no wrong, does no wrong. He is a dummy in his own right, as many people are in this film. But what you're saying, Tucker, I laid this out when I was trying to recount the plot of the movie. It is unclear to me for, let's say, 75% of the movie whether or not they actually like each other, or what, or it's just a case of they run into each other and they fight, because that's how all of their interactions go for the first 2 acts of this film, is that they just fight. Like, when you get that kind of, even in the most, like, toxic, if you want to use that word, like, rom-coms or whatever, I think of something like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which is a modern American example, so far removed from this film and its circumstances, but like 2 people who are mean and awful to each other at basically every turn. at some point there's you also have you also have the scene where they settle down a little bit, they have a heart to heart, and you settle into the charisma of the actors, the chemistry they have together, and the moment that the writers craft for them to make them see past all the each other's flaws or whatever. That scene, forgive me if I'm forgetting it here, but doesn't exist in this movie. And the moment where it becomes clear that they are actually going to get together is probably about 20 minutes from the end of the movie, and it's essentially Antonio saying, listen, I just can't stop. My life cannot stop being impacted by you. So either I'm going to marry you or I'm going to kill you.
Yeah,
that does happen.
He does say that.
And, let this be an impetus for a little discussion on the treatment of women in this here movie, because women
not great.
are treated very poorly. At every corner, almost every scene has a moment in which a woman is berated for kind of doing normal stuff, or is beaten for a misstep or a mistake. Even Carmela is locked up in her room. She is chained to her bed.
She's shackled to her bed.
She's shackled to her bed by her parents and beaten.
Yeah.
Because she won't divulge where he went, but then she does divulge where Antonio went, and that he's working with the communists. It's pretty gnarly. It's the actual on-screen violence is never shown to be very intense, but I think that the implication of it being around all the time, always, is very troubling. She's not hit very hard. She's always she looks okay. It's not like in a modern movie where they would actually make it look like she got really beat up. It's still weird and uncomfortable.
I mean, Antonia does say to her at one point, if I forget why he's levying the threat, but he says, if you do this thing, I will beat you in a way that makes your dad beating you seem light by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And that is
so
just
maybe he does some wrong. I just
we did lay that earlier. He's not a great guy. But, that's supposed to be funny in the context of the time of the film, I guess. These crazy kids, aren't they going to beat each other to death, or aren't they?
Or are they going to kiss?
Yeah, there is this just implicit and taken as fact, very misogynist cultural attitude throughout the film. There's even the exchange that I find really interesting between Carmela and I think her mother, where she's sunbathing, and her mother says to her, "You can sunbathe when you're married." So it's very obvious the way that their culture is organized, and that's just sort of taken as fact. And I guess what we do with that as reviewers 70 years removed is for us to decide. From my view, though, just as a viewer now, it's a very odd dimension of all of the relationships in the film that make it hard for me to really get it. Because another great example, and I think you guys are forgetting when Carmela gets her revenge on Antonio and she feigns being hit by a tram. And then he runs to find her, and we get this sort of very resigned discussion about how they must figure out what to do now because they are known to be in the same place together at night.
Oh, yeah.
And again, this is where we have to simply say that there's a set of cultural attitudes underpinning the plot and stakes of this movie that to me are just completely foreign and wrong.
Yeah, and irrelevant to a lot of our modern life.
And hey, listen, this would be tough to do retroactively at the time, but if the culture of this setting were made a little bit more clear and evident to the point where if a man and a woman are together at nighttime, they're like, well, we got to get married now. You know what people are gonna say. If that was made clear from the outset, then maybe it wouldn't feel like that turn came out of nowhere. But it wasn't, so that turn doesn't seem like it comes out of nowhere.
Well, because it's also just a very contrived plot point.
Yeah,
we have no.
That's the reason they get married, not because they love each other or anything.
Yeah, I mean, we also have no reason to think she wasn't hit by a tram.
She very well could have been.
She says that she just told someone to say that to get him over there.
No, sure.
Yeah, but
right? And she's clearly not injured.
No.
No, right. But what I'm saying is that in the way this movie unfolds by having critical actions and information be conveyed elsewhere, the idea that he's panicked trying to hitchhike into this town to find her in a hospital is not beyond the pale of what this film would do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, when I find out that she's actually fine, I don't really feel anything as a viewer.
No.
Because again, there's no real sense of anchored stakes anywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also because it just honestly, like there's this moment he's like working and he finds out that she's been injured and he like just tries to get anything he can do to get. It's like, I need to get to this hospital. I need to get to this hospital. And in my mind, I'm like, at the moment, I'm like, well, yeah, sure, that's possible. Because also that sounds like something she would do. Like, she's just a very reckless person.
Well, like,
and
she like explodes the fireworks shed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She does blow up a bunch
That's
of
right
fireworks.
before that.
What? It's
Yeah.
before the tram.
Yeah, because she like
yeah, it's right
that's when
before
she
that.
Why
like
did
runs
she
away.
do that? Why does she blow the tram? Why does she blow?
Because
the
she's
place
like
down?
distraction, I
fed
don't
up
know.
with her life, and she's like, I'm running away. I'm gonna blow up all the fireworks or something.
Yeah, and she just does all the. She's just a prankster. Like that's the weird thing about the character is, I don't understand why she's appealing to. We've mentioned this many times, but she's not. She doesn't extend any grace to Antonio in terms of him putting in effort. There are these moments when, after apparently months of work, he's like. A couple of times he's like, oh, actually, I am working towards something for the two of us. And she shows affection and appreciation in those moments. But otherwise, there's no understanding. She's always blaming him for things that he didn't do. And she's always like creating these little, like, 5-year-old boy messing someone's, like, tripping them kind of scenarios where it's just like, you're just kind of a dick. Like, there's this whole part where she like stops up the like the little aqueduct or whatever. She's like just like building a mud pile. I'm like, are you 4? What is happening
Well,
here?
I think she is supposed to be like young and dumb, essentially.
They do
because when he comes to town at the beginning and they have their first interaction, like down by that
she, like,
river
throws
or
lettuce
whatever.
at him. No, that's before that. There's this moment where they're on the street corner, and she's like, "You want this lettuce?" Haha! Throws lettuce at him.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like, what the hell?
but like the down by the river, she like says, "Oh, I cut the braids out of my hair," which is supposed to be like a a maturing thing. Like, see, I'm not a kid anymore. Now that you've come back from war, now I'm ready to court you, Antonio. And he's like, the hair may change, but the head stays the same. Which they lesson that many could learn in our day and age. I feel, but.
What?
Also in that scene,
sit on that one, Tucker. In like a week, you'll get it.
Just another dumb line that is thrown out in this film. Carmela says, "I'd eat you like a plate of spaghetti," which sounds like a line that I would write or anyone would write if they were making a joke about a young couple in 1950s Italy. It's like, "Oh, mamma mia, I'd eat you like a plate of spaghetti." like come on now.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? But yeah, I go back to my thing of like the characters just aren't well written. Like the point of Carmela is that she is young and dumb, and that's it. Like even at the end of the film, Antonio gets this moment where he's like, I've had enough to hear with the systems, the social structures, and I'm tearing it all down.
I'm gonna strip you in front of the town.
Yeah, that's weird. Hey, listen, that's pretty weird, pal. Here, take off your clothes, huh? I'm sorry, Antonio, huh?
And she doesn't say a single fucking
This
thing
is my
during
point.
this entire like 5-minute segment.
That's my
She's just
point.
kind of like,
She's being dragged around by her wrist after Antonio yells at her father. She doesn't get a moment at all to do anything of note, to like feel like she's matured at all, which is kind of like what you would do with her character, I guess, if you set her up to be like this young girl who is just messing things up because she's mad at the world. She didn't get any moment like that. At the end of the movie, when we at least are paying some service to the character arcs of Antonio, she is silent with her head down, being dragged through the town square and jeered at as like, "Oh, you guys go get married, you crazy kids." And she's like, "Oh, I'm half naked being led through the streets of my hometown." And it's not good, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
It's interesting that this is a movie that we chronologically reviewed back to back with The Child, because The Child is also about a very a very childish relationship, and a person who is trying to get their shit together, and a person who is very rambunctious and has very low morals and is always messing up their partner's day. But Bruno in The Child, he learns his mistake by the end. I mean, I criticized that movie for, in my mind, at least what I can remember from that review, not building up to that particularly well, but at least it happened. And it did make it feel like by the end of the film, I understood Bruno on a deeper level because he understood himself on a deeper level. There's never a moment where I feel like Carmela or Antonio learn anything about themselves. And definitely not, they learn things about other characters, like the fact that her father is abusive and that's not okay, and that his mother is taking advantage of him and that's not okay. But they never learn anything about themselves other than, oh, actually, we do want to spend our lives together. It's just very odd.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
I have any more dumb shit that happens in this movie? Let me look.
I mean, maybe my favorite part of it is when the bus drivers. I think the whole bus driver thing is like
Yeah.
my favorite plot line. Like it's like they go and that bus when they first see it is just absolutely completely falling apart. It's just like, and then they can't get it together to like be a cooperative. There is something about in this film. It doesn't say it very well because it only sprinkles it in like 3 times about the collectives and how they operate
Yeah.
with the
Co-ops,
bus
yeah.
drivers and then the communists and then the community as a whole at the end of the film. I think they just exist in the film. I don't think the film really says much about their worth or goodness or lack thereof in society. It's like, yeah, this is here, and the old men, they really don't agree. And oh, is it funny to watch these Italians yell at each other? Oh, haha.
Mhm. I think Abram mentioned this. I don't think we were recording when we mentioned it, but the line that Don Luigi's mother has about being afraid that Juliana will cuck her son, where she's like, I may be old and afraid of death, but I'm more afraid of cuckolding.
It's a great line, but it's also just indicative of how peculiar that whole part of the film is when Antonio goes over to Don Luigi's house, totally willing to not only kill him, but also having calculated out the age he would be when he leaves prison and sort of coming to terms with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately just
But
very...
then also that scene is made even weirder by the senile old woman who's like, I saw a shimmering knife. I saw a shimmering knife.
And then
It's
the
like,
little boy's like, I saw a knife too. And then the policeman's like, well, show me the knife. And he's like, I don't have a knife. He's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm out of here.
Have we talked at all about the sound? Because I feel like that's sort of the last thing I want to raise. They just sort of, Tucker, you used the word cacophony earlier in the film.
Oh my God.
There is a deliberate choice in the sound design of this film to always have many people talking at one time, even if it's not
like
clear.
90% dialogue.
Yeah, and like there's always this like base level of background chatter and crosstalk, even when it's unclear who these people are, if they're even in the frame or the scene. And I understand the feel of that, but I think as I'm watching, as I'm trying very hard to also, to be honest, understand bad subtitling.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
another layer of difficulty to always have what feels like unnecessary diegetic noise constantly.
Well, and the scene that is indicative of the entire movie's like direction and sound design is when Carmela and Antonio speak on the phone, and they are just hollering into the mic, into the phone. They are
because like the phones are
screaming
old
at each other.
I was about to say the phones are old, but I guess
No,
they wouldn't be that old. They'd be a hell of a lot older now, wouldn't they?
We've seen lots of other phones and lots of other movies from years prior, decades prior to this, and they don't scream at each other as like they are just. It's
yeah, this is like someone is in like 1903 using a phone.
Yeah.
It's odd.
So yeah,
It's a
that
weird
dialogue's
movie.
pretty hot, is how we would describe it in the biz, and that's not an
Apparently-
attractive thing.
At this year's most recent Cannes Film Festival, Francis Ford Coppola hosted a screening of this film.
Oh, really?
If you scroll through the reviews on Letterboxd, a lot of them will be from like over the summer, being like, I watched this with Francis Ford Coppola.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Because I think you can draw some parallels between this and Megalopolis.
Yeah.
God, it's only that one
On
Palme
digital
d'Or.
today. Go watch it.
That's true.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
some 4K. What do you think of this boners going
Yes,
around?
that is the one
This is
clip
really
that I've
nice.
seen. Oh, and actually, no, I lied. I did see another clip of how they like translated the audience talking thing into the digital release, which is really
I've also
interesting.
seen a lot of WoW Platinum being ate
Well.
out by Shia LaBeouf in my time.
I saw that.
I
before
saw
the-
that weeks ago, pal. Weeks
I mean-
ago. Somebody got some.
I can close my eyes and see it. I've seen it every day since I saw the movie
dream
in
of
theaters.
Uh-huh.
Let's give this movie a score.
Alrighty.
Why don't we?
Oh, that's something we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you
Um,
remember to pull your spreadsheet up?
I'm the only one with the spreadsheet pulled up.
I have
Wait,
it open.
fuck,
I
this
have
is
it
the-
open.
False.
working
False.
on that
Because
now.
I put the title of the movie on. It was not there.
Wait, I'm on the wrong
Oh,
quest ranking.
Hang on. Yeah. Let me do some Palm details while Abram gets his ducks in a row
I
here.
found it.
So,
Okay, I found
in 1952, I mentioned it at the top of the episode, but 2 Cents Worth of Hope split the Palme d'Or, the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, with Orson Welles' Othello. Perhaps we'll talk about that next week. We will get to it eventually in this series, because that's how it works. Hey, the jury president this year was Maurice Genevoix. We all know and appreciate their work. Other jury members included Jean Dreville and Gabrielle Dorziat. Of course, we know them and love them. Of the 33 other films in competition this year that did not win or split the top prize, notable submissions were Viva Zapata by Elia Kazan, Umberto D by Vittorio De Sica, Detective Story by William Wyler, Ascent to Heaven by Louis Buñuel, and An American in Paris, a film that we've talked about on this a previous
Ah.
iteration of this show.
True.
Yeah, and a Buñuel film too. So
And,
Correct.
and a Weiler film, and
Yeah.
we're stacked. Desica, that's a crazy year. And we had to watch this.
That's right. Well, you know,
We got to watch that.
we were blessed to watch.
We
it.
were
It
allowed
really
to
feels
watch
like to
this.
me that this was like supposed to be the fun one that people laughed at, and then like Othello was like the serious one that they actually gave the top prize
Sure.
to.
But
Annie.
they said they gave the top prize to both, and so
They
here
did.
we are.
They did.
Okay, let's find out what top prize we give this movie by finding a score. That was a little forced, but whatever. Forgive me. Okay, 3, 2, 1, punch. Oh, as the number. Stop the count. Okay, the numbers have come in. We are
Topical.
pretty much thinking about the same. The score is a 3.7. That's pretty
Yeesh.
low, but that's not the bottom. The bottom, if you recall, is 3.5. So no ties today. This is going to go one step above The Last Chance as the second to last film on the list. Spot number 30. Oh, the
I'll
point
be honest,
breakdown.
3.5, not a terribly low average. I think we can go lower.
We've gotten lower on the
Ooh.
previous iteration. So the point
Fair.
breakdown, starting at the bottom, Tucker gave it a 2.8, Tanner gave it a 3.5, Abram gave it a 4.0, and I gave it a 4.5. So some variation, but I think we are all pretty much thinking the same thing on that one.
Not one of the
Yeah.
best. Not one of the best.
One of the worst.
One of the worst.
Number 31, the worst.
The worst. No, it's actually number 30, right?
Yeah.
I was doing a number one, the best thing, Terry.
Oh, I see.
Anyway, go watch My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
Number 1, the best.
The best.
Better movie than this. Also, like, actually, no, set in Greece, notably. That's kind of notably where those films are set.
Well, but only for that one, actually.
That's true. Yeah, the other two
One
are
and two not.
America. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we spin that big fat numbered wheel?
Oh,
My
let's
big-
do it. My big fat wheel.
My big fat numbered wheel.
Alrighty. Oh yeah, we do. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what is your deal?
Boom! Wheel's deal is 34.
34 is, oh, son. Hey, speak of the devil and he shall appear. It is the Palme d'Or winner from the year 1974. starring Gene Hackman, John Cazale, Alan Garfield, and Frederick Forrest. This is Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation.
Okay.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
excited for this one.
How many of you have seen this film before?
Haven't seen
I
it.
have.
Haven't seen it.
This is an excellent film. I cannot wait for you guys to watch
is this
one.
the no?
Spoilers!
This is the one that I have seen. This one. He's got
This
the
is the sound
saxophone.
one.
He's got the saxophone, right?
saxophone
yeah.
thing,
I've
and-
seen this one. Oh,
Timo,
okay.
this is an essential sound nerd watch.
But this one, let me just say this in this episode so I get it out of the way, so I don't have to talk about it next week. But this movie is like all of my intrusive thoughts at once, like all of them about like
Sure, yes.
hiding microphones and listening into shit I shouldn't be
It's
hearing.
sound
and, like,
obsessed, schizo posting. It's
like I really try to wade through those
Timo,
thoughts to
if
get
you
to better
learned to
ones.
play the saxophone, this guy would be you.
I have bad news. I have bad news.
He did play. He was a saxophone player in band.
Do you
Holy
need me to go
shit.
get it? It's right over there.
Yeah.
Well, we can
That's
do a
true
live
fact.
rendition of whatever song he plays in this movie.
I'll try to look
Timo,
some sheet
you are
music up.
he is literally me. Harry Call is who Gene Hackman plays. Oh, also shout out Harrison Ford is in this movie in like a smaller role.
Yeah, he is. He's
Oh, from the trailer for Captain America: New World
Yes.
Order.
The very same.
Exactly.
The very
No,
same.
Brave New World. No, they changed the name of the
They
movie.
changed the name.
That's right, Brave New World.
Okay. Nice.
How can I forget that logo?
okay.
All right.
Looking forward to this one. A film some of us have seen before, some of us have not. So that means that we're gonna have returning new opinions as well as spontaneous ones that we come up during the recording, as happens pretty much every time, I would wager.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for talking about this film. And make sure, dear viewer, to write a comment on it down below. What do you think about Italians? What do you think about yelling? What do you think about this film? There's your prompts. Go type away. Until next time, stay tuned to Backlot Banter for all your movie content. And you know what I always say. Stay cool, keep warm. Peace.